Hey everyone. Hey everyone out there on Facebook and LinkedIn and the Faithia app and anywhere else we might be streaming right now. My name is Jaclyn Whitt, and we'll get to know me in just a minute. But this is Father Dave. I live in Mexico. Father Dave,
Oh,
you?
okay. I had no idea where you were. I've had a feeling somewhere in the US, but you're in Mexico.
Yeah, yeah.
You've always been in Mexico or you've moved
Oh,
down, sort of thing?
no, I've been here for a couple years, but I originally am from Canada.
Wow, okay. So you've never been in the US. There, I'm completely misled, but never mind.
I've visited many times, but I've never
I'm
lived
sure. I think you can't get to Mexico from Canada without going through the US, can you?
there, right?
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And
well
so
done.
where are you from?
I'm in Sydney, Australia,
Okay. All right.
and I've never been to Mexico or Canada. I've been plenty of times to the US, though, but
Okay.
I'd love to get back there, but I don't know if that'll be possible. We will see.
Great. Well, I don't know a whole lot about you, so I'm looking forward to getting to know you. But one of the things that I have learned about you is that you work with youth and adults that are at risk. And we have a little bit in common with that. I actually used to work in a prison for a time. I was teaching
Okay.
life skills, and I also worked in some inner city schools teaching some dance clubs and stuff like that. So I think we've got some similarity in our backgrounds.
I hope so. I assume that's why we've been brought together.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Faithia organized this for us. They learned of you and they learned of me and they paired us up. So this is kind of cool. So tell me a little bit about you. How did you get into doing what you're doing? And just, yeah, tell me about how that is.
Oh, look, I'm an Anglican priest. Um, I think we'd be called Episcopal, I think, in your part of the world. Um, I was I did 30 years as a parish priest in the inner west of Sydney, in an area that was a major, what was the heroin capital of the inner west of Sydney for a long while. And I guess that's just responding to the young people there and I mean, trying to be a force for good in the community. And I think that's how we got started with the boxing club. And yeah, we went down an interesting path. So a lot of my work has been teaching kids to fight, which sounds sort of ironic.
Productive.
I'm still doing that, and I'm still boxing myself.
So how
So
does that work then? How does teaching them to fight actually help them to not fight, I guess?
yeah, look, yeah, that's exactly right. It's a good question. Um, I think it's there's a number of factors to it. I used to if you don't mind me waxing philosophical for a moment, my background was in philosophy, and I did my first university degree was in philosophy, and the ancient Greeks used to understand the human soul as having sort of three parts to it. If you've ever read Plato's Republic, he talks about the just city, which is a place where you've got rulers, you've got workers, and you've got the army, and when they're all working together properly, you've got a good city. And he would say, when it comes to the individual, you've got the ruler, and you've got the workers, and then you've got the army. You've got what the Greeks called the thamos, the sort of fighting spirit,
Mm,
uh, which from the ancient perspective is like 1/3 of the sort of human person, the
right.
sort of fighting spirit. And I think, in a sense, what we try and tap into in the way we do the boxing training. And I also did martial arts, wrestling, all that sort of stuff. We're trying to tap into that fighting spirit in people. I think it's particularly important in men and boys. If you're familiar with any of the sort of men's movement literature, Robert Bly, and that he'd talk about the sort of the big red hairy man in the sort of corporate male subconscious, and the need to sort of address that force and to not tame it, but to control. And
Mm,
because I think from the perspective of the wisdom of the ancient Greeks, having ferocity is fundamental to being human and to a functional human society. Having that sort of energy, the willingness to fight, but learning to control it is the key.
mm.
Uh, Yeah, I think I used to say in Australia here that half the men I knew were beating their female partners, and the other half were like doormats. It was either violence or it was sort of obsequious passivity that men here couldn't find the sort of middle path of being able to be strong, be using their strength to nurture people rather
Mhm.
than for violence. So I
Right.
think in a very important sense, what we do by doing it in play through boxing and the martial arts is we tap into those impulses and then we learn to discipline them, to shape
That
them.
that
You know,
makes a lot of sense. Actually, I think I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about stuff like that as well. I don't know if you know him.
yeah,
Yeah, he's Canadian, but he travels all over the world. But yeah, he talks about that as well, where you know if a man is if he's choosing not to fight because he can and decides not to, that's different than if he's weak and he can't.
yes, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
and
exactly.
I see what you're saying. I raised 2 boys, and so I do understand some of that, especially when they were young.
It's interesting, isn't it? We used to have a boxing ring in the church hall, and whenever we'd have our morning tea afterwards, all the boys would be in the ring wrestling each other, and all the girls would be in the outside watching.
Mhm,
Now, I'm not suggesting there aren't great female warriors. There are. I mean, you think of Mother Teresa had an enormous degree of what the Greeks would call thamos, fighting spirit,
mhm.
rather. But yeah, it tends to be particularly a male thing that boys need to be able to rumble and rough play and all that sort of thing. And I think there's been an unfortunate tendency in our society to try and deny that energy and try and subdue it, and then it tends to burst out in very destructive ways.
Yes, yeah, and
Domestic violence.
I would prefer to have like I think a lot of women would prefer to have a partner that has that ability to protect them and to fight for them if necessary, except that they are in control of themselves and their bodies and their
Exactly.
actions, and that they would choose not to be violent without there being a reason to protect anyone. So but it is so important. I know even like I think I have that fighting spirit. I was a single parent for a while, and I was like the mama bear with my kids,
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
I definitely have that in me. But I still I would like to have that like the man, my husband, I would like for him to have that protectiveness with me, where I know I don't have to be afraid of him, but I know that if I was in danger, then he would be there to deal with it and not just shrink, you know?
Exactly. It is an archetypally male virtue, I think, but in no way is restricted. I've known some wonderful female warriors, in the literal ring sense as well as in the broader sense. But we need people who can both tap into their aggressive energy and control it. And
Mhm.
say the problem we see falls either side of that, and we see that in politics as well too. People are too weak to do
Yeah,
anything, or people who are just horrible and violent, and there's just far too much of that in the world at the moment.
that's true,
So
that's true. So
yeah,
when you're working with them, do you also do some kind of counseling, or is
yeah,
it just
yeah,
training them
yeah,
to fight?
yeah. Very good point. That was the beauty of what we ran the youth drop-in center in the church hall for I think about 25 years, and it was an integrated approach. So we teach guys to box, but we'd also be doing counselling, referral, detox. We ran a camp, which we still run in the middle of the bush, where guys can go out and take a break. Um, so yeah, it was a far more integrated approach, and of course, it was being run by the church. So the beauty of it was the opportunity was there for the kids to integrate into the church community, and we'd see it. It was like a war zone here for a long while back in the 90s, back in the early 90s, especially. We'd see every year we'd have new kids come through, and by the end of the year, some of those kids would have died,
Mhm.
overdosed, and some would have gone to jail, and some were coming through. And the ones who were boxing with us tended to be coming through. The ones who were boxing had also integrated themselves at some level with the church community, were doing the best of all. And
Mm.
I think that's the other dimension to what the reasons for our success, and we did have a lot of success, uh, was that we changed their peer group. And I think that's really the key
That
issue.
does make a difference.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's obviously not only boxing that does that, but if you can, what did Robert Bly call it? Sibling society, where all our values are taken from our peers. If
Mhm.
you can reintegrate people into a community which has values, where there are not just your peers. Everyone used to say to me, "What do you think young people need the most?" And I would say older people,
Right.
uh, and
Mentors.
people younger than them. They need to be reintegrated into a community context, and I think a church community can provide that beautifully, and other communities can as well.
That actually brings a question to mind. So, when I was working in the prison, one of the things that I realized after a while, I noticed a lot of them were talking about, like the inmates were talking about not having a father. And so I finally actually asked them
Yeah,
all, like, how many people in the room grew up without a father in the home? And all but one of them raised their hands. And I realized that was a huge
yeah,
common
yeah,
factor or denominator for all of them. Like, and so I can imagine, but I want to ask you, like, of the youth at risk, or even the adults, these men, how many of them grew up without fathers or a father figure?
yeah. Look, that's absolutely fundamental. You're dead right. And I've been going under the label of Father Dave now for 40 years. Uh, Originally, so I'm coming from a Protestant background, where we were called the Reverend or something, which seemed to put me on a pedestal as far as I could see. And I found so many of the boys I was working with needed a father, so
Oh,
I became Father Dave, and I'm still Father Dave. Uh, but yeah, it's absolutely fundamental, enormous issue, the lack of the fathers. Yeah, I'm dealing with it all the time.
I
Yeah.
could imagine that with them, in the boxing ring and having like a male mentor show them how to develop their skills, how to control themselves. Like that's exactly what a father would have done if they had had a healthy father in the home, right?
Oh, and look, I think some of my greatest memories with kids we've had has been when the father is in the picture, or when we bring the father back into the picture. And then when these boys have their first boxing match, it's me and the boy's dad in the corner. We've had some fantastic experiences like that, where I've worked with the dad, you know what I mean? Often bring him back into the picture. And we've shared that experience together. Extraordinarily bonding
Mhm.
experience, because it brings the father back into the right role of being there in support of the young man, helping him to control his energies, direct him, and take care of him, in a beautiful, very sort of masculine sort of way, I think. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm looking at a comment here. Mary Jo, she's actually my mother, but you can call her Mary Jo. She says others are undervalued. Yeah, I think at times they can be, but I think that that's starting to change. I think that people are realizing that the value is so huge, and I think that that understanding of the value of the fathers in the home is coming back around. And for example, in I didn't mention I'm also a screenwriter, so I write movies, and so one of my films, it's in the process of getting organized to get filmed. That one is based on my time when I worked in the prison. And a big theme in that story is the value of fathers in the home, because it's also taken from a time when I was a single parent. And so the lead character is the single parent in the story, and she's working at the prison, realizing that all of these men in the prison, almost all of them grew up without a father, and her son is already starting to get into trouble. And so there's a lot of dynamic and understanding of the value of fathers in the home. And in this case, there's also the three generations, because the main character's parents are sort of in the picture, but it's kind of there's a lot of tension in their relationship. And so then that's part of the storyline as well, is working that out, so that even though the the child doesn't have a father raising him, the grandfather is able to step in to be that father figure for
Yes.
him.
I think you make a very important point in that the role of the father is bigger than the biological father. I mean, and in fact, they say it takes a village to raise a child, doesn't it? That it's often uncles, not the dad himself, who can play key roles. Again, I think that's where in a church community, you can have a fantastic thing where I know with my son, I've got 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. But I think for my son, particularly having older men who are able to play an avuncular role with him was absolutely essential in his upbringing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, there are a lot of movies that, well, whether it's men or adults, I think that there's a lot of times where an adult believing in a child that they can be better or pursue something that is difficult or whatever, there's so much value in that, that like children will rise to that, or and youth, not just young children, but like when you
Yeah.
have someone older than you believing in you that you're capable, you can do it, and encouraging you, it really makes a huge difference. And so, for you, especially after seeing so many people, so many men come through the program and learn and grow, that when someone comes in and, so other people might look at him like, oh, this is going to be hopeless. This guy is wild. And you're like, give him time,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think I've got the advantage of having had a bit of a rough background myself as a young person, and I always felt I'd never met anyone who was worse than I was.
Mm,
And I think you've got to uh, have that perspective. I think lest we sort of become judgmental.
yeah.
We're,
Yeah.
all, we're always, you know,
Yeah,
never
no,
half
that's
the
a
words, I
really
think.
good way to look at it, and to give everybody that opportunity that, yes, everybody can grow, and to believe in them. That's awesome. I'm just going to check here. Do we have any comments from Facebook? Let me know if you have any questions for Father Dave. I'll ask for you.
I'm keen to hear more about your work, sister. I mean, it sounds fascinating.
Okay, yeah. So I decided that I wanted to raise my kids before I started my career. And so my kids finished school, I would say about 2 years ago, 2.5 years, something like that. And so since then, my husband and I have been just full-time working on the film industry. So for me as a writer, that's what I'm pursuing, except that my husband and I also kind of realized that we wanted to help to support filmmakers. And so it started with me teaching screenwriters to write better stories, how to write stories that are inspirational, not preachy, how to write it so that they're not cheesy, like just a really good, compelling story, especially one that points to God. And so that's where it started. And then we realized actually we could provide support for actors, and then we could provide support for producers. And it's kind of just developed from there, where now we actually support the entire faith-based film industry. And yeah, and that's our goal. And so we've developed a lot of programs where we can actually bring people together to work together, share resources, help each other to meet the people that they need to meet. And I'm hoping and praying that we're going to be able to make more projects this year than we have in past years, past several years combined, because I think that when we do come together, it's something amazing that that God can do with it. Like, so I'll just kind of share a bit of a principle here. So, in the book of Genesis, after the flood, there's the Tower of Babel. Now, I know that that was an evil thing that people were doing. They were doing something that was, against God. However, God said something very interesting. He said, we need to deal with this because these people are of one heart and one mind and one speech. If they continue, there will be nothing that they can't do. Like, so there's a principle in that, that when we are coming together with the same heart and mind, working together, we can accomplish something absolutely incredible. So when we're doing that for the purpose of bringing honor to God and to build something in his name instead of against him, not only will we just by principle be able to accomplish something amazing, but I have no doubt that he will get in there and help make it happen.
Sorry, forgive me, but looking at the biblical side of it, I mean, the Tower of Babel you mentioned is in Genesis, the climax of Genesis 1 to 11. And it's where you've got a series of sort of sin and judgment stories, from the Adam and Eve being evicted from the garden to the flood, to climaxing in a sense this, which is seen as the worst of all human sins. But it's that they're sort of trying to now en masse together build something where God is excluded. That's how I see it. And the judgment which comes on there is the people are divided through speaking in different tongues, which is seen as the worst of the judgment. What's interesting is, if you'd be familiar with the story of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, is the reversal of all of that. If you remember, by the Spirit of God, all the people start coming back together, and the alienation of the languages is sort of miraculously dissolved as people are brought together speaking different tongues. So the key is the presence of the Spirit of God in the project.
Amen.
Yes. So in Genesis 11, you've got the people trying to come in together in a way of excluding God, and God knows. And this is true to reality too. I always say Jack the Ripper did some terrible things, but it took a whole nation to do the Holocaust. You know what I mean? When people come together with a common mind to do something sinister, evil takes on a whole new dimension. That is true. But the flip side of that is when the Spirit of God's involved and people come together in unity under the Spirit of God, we can do amazing things together.
Exactly. And that's what we're pressing into. And things are moving, it's happening, and it's really exciting. So, the film industry is not something that happens quickly. And so I can't say, okay, in a couple months, you'll see the fruition. It might take a year or two before you actually get to see any of these movies. But, they'll be developing, they'll be happening because we're able to work together.
Yeah, look, I've had a few movies made about me and my work and that sort of thing, and I'm familiar with the process. It can be torturous. I'm hoping, I've got someone who's got hundreds of hours of footage now. I'm hoping it's going to turn into a movie, but they can do great things.
Mm-hmm. Are you wanting to turn it into a documentary or like a story?
It's not me. I mean, I've had dozens of documentaries made about me and about what we do. Through TV networks and things, but also a number of movies. And in fact, 3 of them were made in Iran, but they're Farsi.
Wow, that's cool. Well, for any of I have a lot of friends who work in the film industry. So if any of them end up watching this and they're thinking like, wow, this sounds really interesting, because it does sound very much like it's such a guy kind of movie, right? Like with learning how to discipline yourself and finding male mentorship and just the male energy, like that's, I think it's needed. Yeah.
No, even for I appreciate
like it's a positive thing, because I know a lot of, like what you're saying, a lot of boys are kind of told like, sit still, and that energy, there's something wrong with it. And it's not, there's not anything wrong with it. That's just the way that God made men.
Yeah. As I say, the trick is to learn to control, self-control. Yeah.
Great conversation. Awesome. Okay. Well, this is great. Like, this is so cool that we get to, meet each other. We're in different countries. And let's talk about the Faithia app for a moment. How did you find it, and how are you making use of it?
Yeah, look, I think we only just got started with it, so I'm really keen to try and make full use of that. I really have a lot of respect for the people who are behind it. They seem to be some wonderful women there in Chicago with a real vision for sort of bringing the Christian community together in this way, and I think it's great. So I'm not, I think I'm only just dabbling at this stage, but I'm really keen to try and develop it. You're using it extensively?
Well, I'm also learning. What I have learned so far is, I know that like people can post videos. You can watch other people's videos. There are people on there who are mentors or teachers or educators of some kind or consultants, and you can access their services through the app. Same for me. Like I offer some consultation for people that want to learn about pursuing something in the film industry from a faith perspective. Like I'm a good resource for them. So I have my services listed there also. But what I really like is from when I've been speaking with them, like what you were saying, the women there, they are very innovative and creative, and I think that like they're very big thinkers, but at the same time they have a plan for it. So some people are big thinkers, but it's like it's a dream and they have no actual plan for how to get there. And I see that's not the way that they are. They actually have like a methodical plan, because a couple times I've asked, well, what about this? They're like, that is on the list of things after this, which is after that. And I'm like, wow, like they've got this mapped out of how they're developing things. So yeah, they're definitely creating a community which does extend worldwide. I mean, you're in Australia, I'm in Mexico, and I don't know how many people are watching this and where they are at, but I mean, we have the ability to have this conversation in front of the whole world right now. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. And just seeing all of the different faith leaders coming together, and yeah, I appreciate the vision and where it's going, and I'm still learning as they're still continuing to develop. But yeah, I'm still learning all the different what's it called, opportunities, I guess, and functions on the app.
Yeah, I'm still thinking of that model you gave us, a difference between Babel and Pentecost, in a sense that people coming together. We see people come together on the internet and do some terrible stuff.
Right.
I mean, just the prevalence of internet porn and violence and all sorts of stuff. But when people come together under the Spirit of God to do something like this, you know what I mean? I think some wonderful things can happen and are happening. I get to meet you, for instance, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't even, track you down and make it all happen. They asked, would you be interested in doing, like, having a conversation and doing a live event with someone? I was like, sure, set me up. So yeah, like they did it for us. So it was
Yeah,
great.
I think they had trouble matching me.
Oh,
They said, "What are your areas of expertise?" And I said, "Well, boxing, working with young people at risk, bringing Christians and Muslims together. What else? And expertise on the Middle East." I've made multiple trips to Syria, and where we teach boxing to kids in war zones and things like that. And but she said, "Yeah, we're going to have trouble matching you with someone."
yeah, well, they didn't know.
You.
Some background. Yeah. Well, even when I was teaching dance programs at inner city schools, like it's movement, it's not, there was no physical interaction in the sense of like what do you call it? Whatever. There was no impact sports. It was just dance, but it was like a hip hop dance. And so, the kids enjoyed it. And, what was really cool is I kind of had this method for teaching where everybody was required to participate, but they could choose how. So they could either be a dancer, or they could be on my tech crew, or they could be the audience. And so everybody was responsible for something, because even if they were in the audience, that meant that they had to be supportive of the people who were practicing. And so inevitably, in the beginning, when I first start working with them, there's like 6 kids that are the audience, and then maybe that many who are dancing, and 2 or 3 that are doing my tech. But then over, the course of even just a few weeks, it starts to shift where, almost all of the kids are dancers. And then by the end of the sessions that I have with them, which I think went maybe like 8 weeks or something like that, they were all the dancers, and we even performed for their school. And so it was a really great opportunity for them to choose to participate rather than be forced to participate. And I just kept making it look like so much fun that they didn't want to miss out. But yeah, it was cool, because they had to, again, discipline themselves to learn the choreography so that when they performed for the school, they could perform with confidence and all in unity, because everybody was doing the same thing at the same time. And there is something really unique and special about unity, and especially when everybody is choreographed to do the same moves and everyone is actually accomplishing that. It looks amazing.
And I'm sure you know that dancing and boxing are actually have an intrinsic connection between them. So,
Interesting.
oh, look, actually, I remember at my wedding, it was my boxing trainer taught me how to do the waltz, is it?
Uh-huh.
He said, I said, I got no idea how to dance. He said, it's easy. He said, just jab, jab, step back, jab, jab, step back.
Of
And
course.
it worked, and I didn't punch anyone in the process. So it was an absolute win-win.
There you go. That's perfect. Oh, that's so good. So good. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed getting to know you. And I want to thank Faithia for having us and setting this up. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. So look, I don't know if we'll be able to work together again, but it would be great.
Yes, absolutely. We'll have to stay in touch.
Yeah, look, if you know any, if I'm looking for a fight out that way, so if you hear someone in Mexico who's looking for an aging priest to box with,
Okay.
yeah, I'm now the oldest professional fighter in this country ever. So
You still fight?
yeah. In fact, I won the my state light heavyweight title only it was about 2 months ago.
Wow.
Looking for another fight at the moment. I mean, look, the irony is all my fights were about raising money. That's how we kept our youth centre going. Have we got time? I can tell you a little story.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Back in, gosh, where was it? Early 90s, when we were running the youth drop-in centre, and it was a vital work, I felt. I had my archdeacon, that's the assistant to the bishop, in my office wagging his finger at me, saying, you've got to close down your youth drop-in centre. You've got no money. We didn't. We had no money, and we owed $1,000 to the youth worker. We were only giving him $1,000 a month, but we didn't even have that. So he's saying, you can't keep going without money. And I'm saying, have a bit of faith, something will happen. And while he's talking, my boxing trainer comes to the door. Well, my trainer, I'd never had a boxing match in my life. My trainer comes to the door. He says, Dave, you want a professional boxing match? I said, no. Why would I want that? And he said, well, they're offering you $1,000. I said, I'll take it.
Right. I'm in.
This is how I got into it. We raised like 50,000 through that fight, and that kept the youth drop-in going for another year. But at that stage, I'd never had a boxing. I'd done martial arts, kickboxing, this sort of thing, but I'd never had a boxing match in my life. So I jumped straight in the deep end with a professional boxing debut. I think I was actually set up, but I managed to scrape out of it with a draw. And after that, after raising money, this is how we got. After that, I start putting on shows, and what we do, we get all the kids, we train them up, then we put on a show, and the local businesses would sponsor the show, and so we'd have local kids putting on a show for the local community, supported by local business, and that was a really good way of doing it, and that's how we kept the whole program going for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I came into fighting through the back door, but I've kept doing it ever since, initially to raise money, and now I'm not in any sort of paid employment position myself. So we're still trying to run the programs we're doing. So
Wow.
if I can get another fight, I know I'm in my 60s now. It's not normally the time when you're looking for.
I didn't want to ask. I was actually curious how old you were, but I wasn't going to ask.
I'm turning 63 in a few weeks, but
Wow.
which makes me the oldest professional fighter in this country, and I think the record worldwide is 64, so I'm not too far away if I can make it that far. But look, if I get knocked out again or something, that'll be the last one.
Well, there's a lot of people potentially watching this, so who knows what country they're living in and how you might end up getting connected. That would be really cool, though.
It would be great. Yeah, I'm the current light heavyweight champion of my state, so there's some credibility there, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But look, it's the truth is I've never actually enjoyed the actual hard fighting side of it at all. It's always just been working with the people, working with men, with younger people, and engagement. You know what I mean? The engagement, which I love, and then seeing people nurtured through that, seeing people grow or become growing confidence,
Yeah.
you know, and self-discipline, and then emerge out of the hole they are in. You know, I mean, that's for me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And something else I've noticed, like from having raised boys, is sometimes it's like they needed to exhaust themselves physically to be able to think clearly. And yeah, so it's hard to explain because I don't want to say it in a way that would belittle anything in them. But like, I just noticed sometimes that boys, like, there's this energy where it's like they just can't think clearly. But if you give them like something physically difficult to do, something strenuous, then they get physically exhausted and then their brain can work again.
Yeah, yeah. It often helps people. Yeah, I'm just thinking of a guy years ago who came into my drop-in center, and really big guy, you know, a Portuguese guy, says, "You do boxing here?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You do a couple of rounds with me?" I go, "Okay." Um, anyway, it wasn't what I wanted to do, but I got in the ring with this guy, did a couple of rounds with him, and straight away it was obvious this guy did not want to hurt me,
Mm.
you know, which was good. Then after 2 rounds, he says, "I hear you do Bible studies here as well." I say, "Yeah." He goes, "I really need to join one." But
Oh,
what was interesting, he just got out of prison that day, and
yeah.
the people there had said, "Go see Father Dave. You know, he'll set you straight." And he couldn't bring himself to talk about the spiritual issues and the deeper issues on his heart until he'd had a bit of a rumble. You know, it's sort of like until we connected at a physical level, he couldn't open up at an emotional level. And I think there's, you know, I found that in the fight community a lot with women as well as with men, that sort of that people tend to be very reticent. But once you sort of get in, muck around with them a bit and have a physical connection with each other, the
Mhm.
other stuff starts to flow. But I think it's particularly the case with men. We need to be able to, you know, we're in a society where men don't touch each other, or at least straight men,
Right.
at least until we've got a few beers in us. Once we've a bit drunk, we're all
Yeah, well,
over it,
the
you
culture
know?
is more of a cold culture, right? There are certain cultures in the
Yeah.
world where being close is just very common. You're
Well,
always up against everybody, but in like some of the Western cultures, everybody has their space and you just don't get into it.
yeah, look, so I spent a lot of time in Syria, and in Arabic culture, it's very normal for two men to walk down the street holding hands, you
Yeah,
know?
and
Yeah,
they're straight.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the front cover of my book on
Same in
Christians and
Africa.
Muslims, I've got the Mufti there holding my hand, you know, like just standing alongside me holding my hand, which is lovely. And
Hmm.
it's a sign of connection and affection. But yeah, I can tell you in Australian culture, we just, you know, thump each other in the arm, and until we've, say, had a couple of beers or something, then we're all over each other, you know. So
Right,
it
right, right.
shows that there is this need to connect, I think, at a tangible level, which
Yes.
is culturally repressed. But you know, I think that maybe that's one of the reasons sports are so important here. They give you the excuse to connect physically with each other in a, you know, positive heterosexual fashion. You know, it's
Yeah, yeah. It has nothing to do with sex whatsoever. It just has to do with human contact, and we
yeah,
do have a need for that. Yeah. Even if
well,
it is just like bumping up against each other.
yeah,
So
there's ways
my
of
mom
connecting.
is also congratulating you on still fighting and winning, and she's enjoying our conversation. Just wanted to let you know she put that in the chat.
Thank you very much. Hopefully, I've still got a few fights left in me. We'll see. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah, love to fight in Mexico. I mean, that's a place where some of the greatest legends in boxing history come from.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's interesting because boxing's always been it's the legacy of the working class, and it's always the great fighters are always people who've struggled. You know,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think it's often, you know, the outward fighting is just a manifestation of the inner warrior. You know, you
Yeah.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, it's like symbolic of the inner struggle, right? Like we all have that inner struggle, but it's gonna manifest externally differently. And I think that sometimes like the movie Rocky is one of those things where we see the external fight is also is like, just that's what we get to see of what's actually happening internally for him.
Yeah, look, I think it always is. You
Yeah.
know, it always, the people who are doing really well, they don't look to take up boxing. You know? I mean, most people, having taught thousands of people now, most people come because they're angry. You know,
Yeah, they need to work it out. Yeah.
yeah, and interestingly, you know, then they stick with us a while. They get over their anger issues. A lot of them move on. You know,
Interesting.
yeah, I remember I had one guy. He'd started fighting. He had 3 straight wins, I think it was, and then he came and said, yeah, he'd come in with a heroin problem, you know, with a drug problem. By this stage, she was doing great, and after 3 wins, he comes and says, "Dave, I don't think God wants me to fight anymore." You know, and I say, "Oh, yeah, he does." You know,
You're winning.
he dealt with his issues. You know, he dealt with his demons, and he lost any desire. And I think that some of our great success stories like that, people overcome their anger issues, and they lose that need. They don't need to fight anymore. You know, which is great, but
Yeah.
disappointing from the point of view of a boxing club.
Right. We're losing our best one. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Cool. Well, I think probably I'm going to, I think we're going to close out. But
Okay.
this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and
I'm
talking
afraid,
about this kind of
yeah,
stuff.
I feel I've dominated. I really wanted to hear more from you. I'm
No,
sorry.
I think it was great. It was interesting. I mean, you can see I wrote a book. I don't know which side it's on, but anyways, I wrote a book. It's about it's about telling stories, but understanding that God is telling a story through our lives. So I wrote it from the perspective of a screenwriter, so someone who writes movies. But I broke it down into different storytelling techniques, and then I flipped it to say, okay, so yes, I do this as a writer, but now God actually is doing that same thing for you in your life. And so then when you understand the different techniques that an author uses, and understand that you are the character in the story, then you can recognize certain details in your life and kind of respond to it differently. Because if we can get on the same page with God, like if God is wanting to teach us something or take us somewhere, if we're aware of what that is, we're in a better position to actually make, like, to participate and to get there, instead of just being like fighting God the whole time, which I think a lot of us do, because we're like, hey, my way isn't working. What's going on? I got to try to make that work. But if you can slow down and be like, oh, God's trying to get my attention right now. What's he trying to show me? We're going to end up getting where we need to go faster.
That's brilliant. I'd love to get. How do we get your book?
Well, it's available on Amazon, and I have it both in English and in Spanish.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah. So it's available on Amazon. It's probably the best place to get it. It's called "In the Beginning, Middle, and End: A Screenwriter's Observations of Life, Character, and God." There's actually you can get a free chapter of it. I have a chapter on miracles that is available for free from my website. So on whichever side my website is on, www.jaclynwhitt.com.
Okay.
You can go there and download a free PDF of that chapter, and then you'll get a sense for the book. And if you like it, you can go buy the whole book.
Oh, that sounds great. No, I'd love to. Yeah, maybe I can. I mean, I'm happy to send you a copy of my books as well.
Oh, sure. That'd be
Yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah. So I only just realised we've got these comments. I hadn't brought them up. It's just interesting. One of the guys who's watching is the guy I had my professional debut with back in 1996. We're still friends.
On your, okay, so you have some streaming. What comments do you have? I
Oh,
don't.
they're just people saying hello. I've got Karen there saying good afternoon, and yeah, nothing too. These people know me too well.
There
I've
you
heard
go.
all these stories before. In fact, Dimitri's lived it with me. So there you go.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I've got a few people watching on my side too. And I think Joy is saying testimonies. I think probably she's mentioning that she's enjoying the testimonies, or maybe she's telling me that I should talk about the testimonies that are in my book, because I do share about my own life as well. And so there's two things that kind of make it a unique book, aside from the perspective that I mentioned. So I do share some of my own scripts, not the whole thing, just segments of it. So, when I'm talking about a particular detail, I'm like, here's an example from a script that I wrote. And then I also do share examples from my own life where I could see that God was doing something. And here's an actual example from life, not just a story that I wrote. So yeah, there's that in there too. So it's a little mixed bag of a few things, but it's a lot of fun, and it's not just for writers. Even people who are not writers who have read it have really enjoyed it.
I'd really like to read it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I often forget to like plug my own stuff, but yeah. Well, awesome. I do need to go, but I've enjoyed this, and I hope we get to do this again sometime.
That would be great. Let's stay in touch.
For sure. Take
And
care.
yeah, thank you to everybody who's been with us. It's been good. God bless you. God go with you.
Fantastic.